So one of the things I forgot to mention is that one of the prophets, Elijah, was sent by God to kind of set the false prophets of Jezebel, the great whore of the Bible, straight. She was married to King Ahab, who was a terrible king. Like I mentioned, the book of Chronicles describes all the kings as good or bad compared to the one, David. If a king was good, it's like, this king, was great. He was very much like David. This other king, he was terrible. He was nothing like David. That other king, he was pretty good. He was kind of like David. It was always comparing to David. He was the golden standard. Well, King Ahab and Jezebel, they had their own brotherhood of false prophets. So Elijah is called by God to go to Mount Carmel and have a showdown. And I love the story because Elijah calls God to burn a sacrifice that he set up, even though he poured water all over it, and God consumes it whole. And he's like, okay, your turn. And then the prophets, the false prophets of Jezebel, they call their gods, and of course nothing happens because, they don't exist. So I love is that Elijah is like, what's the matter? Maybe you need to call them a little louder. Maybe they can't hear you. Maybe your gods are kind of hard of hearing. He's so sarcastic. And then he kills them, so whatever. The end of the sarcasm. But the moral of the story is that all the kings were good or bad compared to David. So he's the golden standard. All right, so the prophets are going around and they're always giving everybody bad news. Well, now things are really going to get serious because instead of having to contend with Canaanites, like Philistines, now you have empires that have grown in the surrounding regions. And there's going to be two empires that are going to come in and pretty much wipe out the people. You have the Assyrians that are going to wipe out the northern kingdom of Israel. And then a century or so later, you're going to have the Babylonians come and wipe out the Assyrians, and with them, the southern kingdom of Judah. And then everybody's exiled. Now, God is sending prophets to each of these periods of history to give his will. So first, you have the kingdom of Assyria threatening them. So what does the northern kingdom of Israel do? They go running to help from Egypt instead of crying out to God like they used to. And how ironic is that? Like Egypt, where they came out of in the first place. And what does the southern kingdom do? They try to bargain with the Assyrians, make a deal with them. Again, instead of crying out to God the way they used to. So imagine God is up there watching his people, both halves of his kingdom, going to other nations for help. So he must be thinking up there, my God, they've forgotten, well, he wouldn't say my God. Myself, they keep forgetting who I am and they don't cry out to me anymore. So he allows these empires to wipe them out. And he announces this through the prophets. First, Isaiah. He's the, here I am, Lord, is it I, Lord? So he's basically saying, send me with your message. Of course, the message is doom and gloom. And it comes to pass. The Assyrians wipe out the northern kingdom of Israel. 100 years later, he calls Jeremiah with the exact same message. Tell them that what happened in the north is about to happen in the south, this time at the hands of the Babylonians. And it happens. So they're all scattered. No more kingdoms. Everybody's exiled. Now, amongst the exiles, there's another major prophet, Ezekiel. And Ezekiel is the one that tells them God is going to, and actually, Isaiah and Jeremiah predicted this in the future as well. There's going to be a day where we come back to our promised land. And God will unite us, and he's even going to raise a new king for us, just like David. Now that got their attention, because remember, David is like, he's the man, So they all wanted another David to deliver them. So Ezekiel has these really intense visions of an army of God being created in a valley of dry bones, having the flesh grow on those bones, which is kind of like a foreshadowing of resurrection. Because at this time, they don't really have a clear concept yet of resurrection. If you die and you're good, you somehow join Abraham. You go to the bosom of Abraham. And if not, you go to this shadowy underworld called Sheol, where you're just it's kind of like limbo, you know? They don't have a concept of heaven and hell yet the way we do. They don't have a concept of the soul, so it's kind of like very undefined. But Ezekiel now has this clear vision of the dead coming back and becoming God's armies. Very interesting vision. We call this apocalyptic literature because when we talk about symbolic images that have to do with the end times, we call that apocalyptic. So keep that in mind because we're going to see that again in Daniel and then again at the very end with the book of Revelation, the apocalypse, of course. All right, so we got some bad news, but there's a little good news because mixed in with the doom and gloom is the hope of coming back and having a king just like David. Now, one last little prophecy that I need to mention is that Isaiah prophesies about a suffering servant. And it sounds like that suffering servant is the people Israel. But at the same time, it sounds like it's an individual because we're told that he's going to take the sins of Israel on himself and he'll be pierced for our transgressions. We know who that is, but they don't know yet. So let's pretend we don't know either. Right now, it's bad news. Whom shall I call? Whom shall I send? My people just talking smack all over again. Isaiah, I call you, the rich forsaking the poor, and that won't do. I got bad news you don't want to hear. You will lose when Assyria draws near. I'm bringing bad news, but the promise is true. I still see a David light in you. It's like a fire inside your bones. You just can't keep my words inside your mouth. Jeremiah, I call you. What happened up in the north is heading south. I got bad news you don't want to hear. You will lose when Babylon draws near. I'm bringing bad news, but the promise is true. I still see a David light in you. I see a valley of dry bones. Ezekiel, I call you to call them home. Scattered people, come on out of your graves. La da da da, they laughed when you fell. Scattered people, there will come a new day. La da da da, when I shepherd you myself. Do you still remember the glory days with David on the throne, my Jerusalem? My servant suffers now until I bring him home, until the end. And my bad news you don't want to hear. You will lose when Assyria draws near. I'm bringing bad news you don't want to hear. You will lose Babylonian draws near. Go and tell them bad news, the ending is near. You will lose when the empire draws near. I'm bringing bad news, the promise is true. I still see a shall I call? Whom shall I send? My people just talking smack all over again.